The biggest animated series in television history started as a set of throwaway doodles, sketched in a lobby by a cartoonist who refused to sell the rights to his real comic strip. Some of the most iconic shows you grew up watching were never supposed to exist the way you remember them because they began as accidents, backdoor deals, failed pilots, dream sequences, and in one case, the direct result of a mother who would not stop nagging her son. Today we're counting down 13 TV shows that nearly spun off from something else, or spun off so far from the original idea that nobody recognized where they came from. If you love this kind of behind-the-scenes TV history, go ahead and hit like, subscribe, and let's get into it. Number 13. The Andy Griffith Show. Television historians call The Andy Griffith Show the first true network spin-off, and it all traces back to a single episode of another series. On February 15, 1960, The Danny Thomas Show aired an episode called Danny Meets Andy Griffith, where Danny Williams gets pulled over and arrested in a small southern town called Mayberry by a folksy sheriff named Andy Taylor. Producer Sheldon Leonard had spotted Griffith performing in the Broadway production of No Time for Sergeants, and that Danny Thomas episode functioned as a stealth audition, what the industry calls a backdoor pilot. What makes this origin story stranger is that almost nothing in it matches the show audiences eventually got. Andy simultaneously held the titles of sheriff, mayor, newspaper editor, and justice of the peace. Aunt Bee didn't exist yet, and while Frances Bavier did appear, she played a completely different character, a widow named Henrietta Perkins. Even the town drunk wasn't Otis, but a man named Will Hoople. 5-year-old Ronnie Howard, years before anyone would call him Ron, played little Opie in that original episode. When The Andy Griffith Show premiered on October 3, 1960, the backdoor pilot as a television tool had officially arrived. Number 12. The Jeffersons, Maude, and Good Times. If Andy Griffith invented the spinoff, Norman Lear turned it into a production line. All in the Family debuted in 1971, and what it generated over the next few years remains the most impressive spin-off cascade in television history. B. Arthur played Edith Bunker's outspoken liberal cousin Maude as a guest spot, and CBS programming chief Fred Silverman called Lear almost immediately afterward, pushing for a full series, which launched in 1972. Good Times followed in 1974, built around Maude's housekeeper, Florida Evans, played by Esther Roll, making it a spin-off of a spin-off. And then came The Jeffersons in 1975, which ran for 11 seasons and 253 episodes, outlasting the show that created it. Most people don't realize that George Jefferson was written specifically for Sherman Hemsley, but Hemsley couldn't take the role right away because he was performing in the Broadway musical Pearlie. Lear created George's brother Henry as a temporary stand-in until Hemsley became available. Lear later explained that the idea of the Jeffersons moving on up was partly inspired by a visit from 3 Black Panther members to his CBS office who challenged how black families were being portrayed on television. Good Times also carries a controversy worth knowing. Screenwriter Eric Monte sued in 1977, claiming his ideas had been stolen for Good Times, The Jeffersons, and What's Happening. According to the Los Angeles Times, Monte received a $1 million settlement and a small percentage of Good Times residuals, but he has said publicly that he was pressured into the deal and blacklisted afterward. Number 11. Laverne and Shirley. Norman Lear owned the drama side of the 1970s spin-off era, and Gary Marshall owned the comedy side, which makes the origin story of Laverne and Shirley feel exactly right. During a Television Academy Foundation interview, Marshall explained that his mother kept hounding him about giving his sister Penny work, that she was driving him crazy, asking why Penny wasn't on television. That nagging led Marshall to create 2 working-class Milwaukee girls named Laverne DeFazio and Shirley Feeney as dates for Fonzie in the Happy Days Season 3 episode A Date with Fonzie, which aired November 11, 1975. Penny Marshall played Laverne, and Cindy Williams played Shirley. ABC greenlit the spinoff as a mid-season replacement, and it premiered on January 27, 1976 to a #1 debut in the ratings. What almost derailed it before it started was Cindy Williams, who initially turned down the role. A screen test was filmed with a different actress named Liberty Williams, no relation, before Cindy was talked back into it and refilmed her scenes the same evening. Number 10. Mork and Mindy. Staying in the Gary Marshall universe makes sense here because this origin story tops them all. Marshall's young son had just watched Star Wars and complained that Happy Days didn't feature any space people. Marshall actually walked into the writer's room and pitched the idea of an alien visiting the Cunninghams. And story editor Brian Levant later recalled that the writers looked at each other like it was the most horrible idea any of them had ever heard. That horrible idea became the Season 5 episode My Favorite or Can, which aired February 28, 1978, featuring an alien named Mork who tries to abduct Richie Cunningham. Writers played it safe by framing the whole thing as Richie's dream at the end, but Marshall later put it simply, saying the dream turned out so funny that it suddenly wasn't a dream anymore. Casting the role became its own legend. Marshall's sister Ronnie had seen an unknown stand-up comic named Robin Williams performing a spaceman bit, and when Williams showed up to audition and was told to take a seat, he sat on his head. Marshall cast him right there. Network executives were so impressed that a contract for his own series was signed 4 days later. What really gets me about this one, though, is that no traditional pilot ever existed for Mork and Mindy. Marshall cobbled together footage of Mork's Happy Days appearance with clips of Pam Dauber from a completely unrelated unsold pilot called Sister Terry, and that Frankenstein reel is what sold ABC on the show. Years later, for syndication purposes, the original Happy Days episode was re-edited so that Mork's visit played as real instead of a dream. They literally rewrote history after the fact. Number 9. Melrose Place. By the early 1990s, Aaron Spelling and creator Darren Star had a worldwide phenomenon with Beverly Hills 90210, and they did what any smart producers would do, which was embed a spin-off inside it. A Season 2 storyline paired Kelly Taylor with an older carpenter named Jake Hansen, played by Grant Show, and several 90210 cast members guest starred in the new show's early episodes to pull the existing fan base over. Melrose Place premiered July 8, 1992, and struggled at first as a fairly earnest drama about 20-somethings. What turned it around was a tonal pivot to full soapy sensationalism, powered by the arrival of Heather Locklear as Amanda Woodward. A darker footnote sits underneath the show's run. Actress Hunter Tylo was cast on Melrose Place in 1996, and then fired by Spelling after announcing her pregnancy. Tylo sued and won $4.8 million from a Los Angeles jury on December 22, 1997, broken down as $4 million for emotional distress and nearly $900,000 for economic loss. One juror stated that the jury believed she could absolutely play the role and do the job. Number 8. The Simpsons. Everyone sort of knows this one, but nobody knows the full version. Producer James L. Brooks was developing the Tracey Ullman Show for Fox and wanted animated segments to play before and after commercial breaks, basically filler content. After admiring cartoonist Matt Groening's Life in Hell comic strip, Brooks asked Groening to adapt it for the show, but Groening refused to sign away his publication rights. And that's when, sitting in the lobby before his pitch meeting, Groening frantically sketched a different family, named the characters after his own relatives, and walked in with The Simpsons. The Tracey Ullman Show debuted April 5, 1987, and the first Simpsons short called Good Night aired on April 19th of that year. Those little interstitial segments became the most popular part of the entire program, which led Brooks to convince Fox to give them their own half hour. A standalone Simpsons series premiered December 17, 1989, with the Christmas special Simpsons Roasting on an Open Fire. After the spin-off turned into a cultural force, Tracey Ullman filed a lawsuit claiming her show was the source of its success and that she deserved a share of the profits. Courts sided with the network. One detail that captures just how fast The Simpsons exploded is a marketing study that found 85% of Americans recognized the Simpson family by November of 1990, up from just 14% who knew the shorts existed. Number 7. Xena Warrior Princess. Lucy Lawless first appeared as Xena in The Hercules, The Legendary Journeys Season 1 episode The Warrior Princess, playing a villain originally scheduled to die in her third appearance. Audience reaction changed everything, and producers scrapped the planned death to develop a spin-off instead. Co-creator Robert Tapert later explained the reasoning behind the decision, saying the studio told them they should rip themselves off before somebody else does. Xena premiered on September 4, 1995 with the episode Sins of the Past and ran 6 seasons through June 18, 2001, which meant it outlived Hercules by a full year. A casting detail worth mentioning is that Lawless wasn't the original pick. British actress Vanessa Angel was set to play Xena but withdrew due to illness, and the part went to the relatively unknown Lawless, which turned out to be one of those happy accidents that changes an entire show. Number 6. NCIS. NCIS ranks among the most watched programs in television history, and it exists because of a 2-part backdoor pilot buried inside another show entirely. Creator Donald Bellisario, the same producer behind Magnum P.I., Airwolf, and Quantum Leap, had been thinking about a naval criminal investigative service series for years before pitching it to CBS president Les Moonves in 2002 as something like JAG meets CSI. Those 2 backdoor episodes, titled Ice Queen and Meltdown, aired during JAG's 8th season on April 22nd and April 29th of 2003, drawing 13.8 million and 13.6 million viewers respectively, both numbers that beat JAG's season average. CBS picked up the show in May of 2003, and it premiered that September under the clunky original title Navy NCIS. A few production details never made it to the final version. A character named Vivian Blackadder appeared in the backdoor pilot but was dropped before the series launched because producers felt the actress came across as too soft for the part, and Sasha Alexander replaced her as Caitlin Todd. On top of that, the 2 pilot episodes were re-edited into a single 1-hour promotional film called NCIS: The Beginning, designed to sell the series to affiliates and advertisers. That cut aired once and was never released on home video. Number 5. CSI Miami and CSI New York. What the CSI franchise pulled off was using the backdoor pilot playbook twice in a row, one spin-off launching another spin-off. CSI Miami originated from the CSI Season 2 episode Cross Jurisdictions, which aired May 9, 2002, and then CSI New York launched through a CSI Miami Season 2 episode called MIA NYC Nonstop on May 17, 2004. Behind the scenes, real tension shaped these launches. CSI star William Peterson opposed spin-offs entirely and asked producers not to place him in any scenes with the Miami cast, which is why Gil Grissom shares absolutely no dialogue with the Miami characters in the backdoor pilot. Once you know that, it becomes a strange thing to watch. Producers also openly admitted they rushed both spin-offs to beat potential CSI copycat shows to the punch, treating speed as a competitive weapon. Number 4. Daria. Daria Morgendorffer started out as a recurring character on Mike Judge's Beavis and Butthead, the deadpan foil to 2 of the dumbest characters on television. MTV faced a specific problem at the time, which was that their audience skewed overwhelmingly male, and by several accounts, the network was desperate for female viewers. That desperation led them to approach story editor Glenn Eichler about developing a Daria spin-off. A 5-minute pilot called Sealed with a Kick was produced in 1995, and Mike Judge gave permission to use the character but had zero involvement because he was busy creating King of the Hill. Judge later admitted he was surprised to learn MTV moved forward without him, suggesting they were trying to prove they could build something successful on their own. Daria premiered March 3, 1997, and ran 5 seasons, which at 4 years and 10 months made it the longest-running animated series in MTV history. In a deliberate move to carve out its own identity, the show never referenced Beavis and Butthead beyond a single mention of the town of Highland. Number 3. Family Matters and Empty Nest. These 2 share a spot because they represent the same phenomenon, spin-offs hiding in plain sight, and both qualify as genuinely surprising entries on this list. Family Matters is a spin-off of Perfect Strangers. Most people have no idea. Harriet Winslow, played by Jo Marie Payton, originally worked as the elevator operator at the Chicago Chronicle on Perfect Strangers, and producers Thomas Miller and Robert Boyette loved her energy enough to build an entire show around her character. Reginald Vell Johnson joined as her police officer husband Carl, introduced on Perfect Strangers in a scene where Harriet deflects Balky's nosiness with the line, "This is a family matter." The show that borrowed that phrase for its title premiered September 22, 1989, and ran 9 seasons. What Nobody Planned For arrived midway through season 1. A nerdy neighbor named Steve Urkel showed up for a single episode called Laura's First Date, played by Jaleel White in what was supposed to be a one-and-done appearance. White's performance triggered studio audience chants of his character's name, and Urkel consumed the show so completely that the youngest Winslow daughter Judy was quietly written out after season 4. White has said publicly that the original cast did not welcome him as his character overshadowed everyone else. Empty Nest tells a different version of the same story. This was supposed to launch as a Golden Girls spin-off from the season 2 finale, which aired May 16, 1987, and was written by Golden Girls creator Susan Harris. Paul Dooley and Rita Moreno starred as a couple, with David Leisure attached partly as a vehicle for his fame as the Joe Isuzu advertising character. A fall 1987 launch was planned, and then the whole thing collapsed. Moreno later called it a very bad show and explained that the script needed rewrites, but Harris was too ill to handle them, so other writers kept changing her character daily. By the time they filmed before an audience, Moreno couldn't remember her first line. Harris overhauled the entire premise with a new cast, and the retooled Empty Nest premiered October 8, 1988, now starring Richard Mulligan as a widowed Miami pediatrician named Dr. Harry Weston. That version ran 7 seasons and 170 episodes. Only David Leisure carried over from the failed pilot, and even his character got a new name. Number 2. Boston Legal. This entry is less about an almost spin-off and more about a show born from another show being gutted alive. David E. Kelly's The Practice debuted on ABC in 1997 and won back-to-back Outstanding Drama Series Emmys in 1998 and 1999, but ratings dropped over time. For the 2003 through 2004 season, ABC renewed the series but slashed Kelly's budget nearly in half, according to Daily Variety. Kelly's response was scorched earth. 6 cast members were fired, including Dylan McDermott, whose per-episode salary reportedly exceeded $300,000. James Spader came in as the amoral and fascinating attorney Alan Shore, won an Emmy, and suddenly everyone paid attention again. On March 11, 2004, ABC announced The Practice would not return, and the final episodes effectively became a launchpad for a new series. Boston Legal premiered October 3, 2004, with Spader, William Shatner, and Candice Bergen leading the cast, and it ran 5 seasons, collected multiple Emmys and a Peabody Award, and became one of the most acclaimed legal dramas of the 2000s. A small detail that reveals how deliberate the transition was is the original working title, The Practice, Fleet Street. Number 1. Frasier. And this is the one that earns the top spot because Frasier almost had nothing to do with Cheers at all. Frasier Crane first appeared on Cheers during the 1984 Season 3 premiere as a romantic obstacle between Sam and Diane, and Kelsey Grammer reportedly received hate mail from viewers for keeping the couple apart. When Cheers wrapped in 1993 with a finale that drew a 45.5 rating, a 64 share, and an estimated 93 million viewers, making it the second highest rated series finale ever behind MASH. Both NBC and Paramount wanted a Thursday night replacement built around Grammer, but Grammer resisted a direct spin-off. Working with former Cheers writers David Angel, Peter Casey, and David Lee, he first developed a completely different concept where he'd play a wealthy, wheelchair-using publisher clashing with his streetwise live-in nurse. No Frasier Crane, no psychiatry, no radio show, no Seattle. Paramount Television rejected that pitch and pushed for a Frasier Crane vehicle instead, and the creators found a compromise. They'd do the spinoff, but set it in Seattle to put geographic distance between the two shows. And they imposed a strict rule of no Cheers cameos in Season 1 to prove the series could stand on its own before leaning on nostalgia. Frasier premiered September 16, 1993, and debuted at number 7 in the Nielsen rankings, with a 16.8 rating. Over 11 seasons and 264 episodes, it collected 37 Primetime Emmy Awards, which was a record for a scripted series at the time, including 5 consecutive Outstanding Comedy Series wins from 1994 through 1998. For a show that was nearly about a publisher in a wheelchair, that qualifies as the greatest creative pivot on this list. One more detail that rounds out the story nicely is that Frasier wasn't even Cheers' first crack at a spinoff. That distinction belongs to the Tortellas, built around Carla's sleazy ex-husband Nick, which premiered in January of 1987 and was canceled after 13 episodes. Sometimes the best spinoff is not the first one you try. Conclusion: 13 shows, and the pattern across 3 decades of television holds up every time. The carefully engineered spin-offs, the ones greenlit in boardrooms with marketing decks and demographic studies, were a coin flip at best. What actually worked were the accidents. A one-shot guest character who made the audience scream. A dream sequence too funny to stay a dream. A set of filler cartoons sketched in a lobby 5 minutes before a meeting. None of these shows were supposed to become what they became, and that's the whole point. The best ideas in television history didn't come from the plan, they came from the pivot. And if you've ever looked at your favorite show and assumed it was always supposed to be exactly what it turned into, now you know it almost wasn't. If this one worked for you, check out our video on the topic linked on screen, and we'll see you in the next one.